Welcome to When Laid Off, Paid Off, Redundancy Success Stories. Coming up in this episode.
It's very hard to always stay positive, but I would say keep a positive attitude, talk to people, get what help and support that you can out there, and honestly, sometimes the very best things that happen in life are because something awful has happened before.
I think the key thing for me is, in a sense, being authentic about who you are as a person and being genuine.
You're watching When Laid Off, Paid Off, the show about providing positive stories and inspiration to find the silver lining if you're struggling with the challenges and uncertainty of redundancy. I'm your host, Batchelor, and I'm a presenter, producer, and curator of TEDx Folkestone. And I'm on a mission to help people find and express their purpose and passion so that they can find and do the work that they love. This episode comes to you in partnership with Heads Up HR. This episode's story comes from business owner and financial planner David Braithwaite. David suffered the shock of instant and unexpected redundancy. But out of his challenge, David decided to take control of his life, his work, and his future. Coming up later in the show, we'll also hear from HR expert Nick Hawley from Heads Up HR. But first, let's hear David's story.
Hello, I'm David Braithwaite, and I was made redundant in 1992. I was working at the time in a estate agency, and now I actually have my own financial planning business, along with other related business interests as well. At the time, I remember it vividly. I was working in the estate agency's office, and these two people walked in one morning looking very official, and that's because they were in fact the official receivers for the company, and they made me redundant there on the spot, and despondently I had to hand the keys back to the company car and walked out the front door and literally had to walk home. Compounded with that was also the fact that I'd recently bought a house, and before taking on that commitment of the mortgage, I'd discussed it with the area manager. Is my job safe? Are we okay as a business? And he reassured me that everything was fine, so I went ahead and did it. Turns out he didn't know quite so much about the company and the business as he thought he did. Also, coupled with that, my father also was made redundant at exactly the same time from his company that he worked for. So we had this strange scenario where both of us found ourselves down at the job centre to sign on. And every 2 weeks when we had to go down there and declare that we had no work to claim the redundancy payments that we were getting for the job seekers, we were both in the queue next to each other, because in alphabetical order is how you get allocated your space in the queue. So I found myself in line with my dad for every 2 weeks for about 6 months, which is a very strange situation to find yourself in. What I then ended up doing was working in a branch of a building society in Maidstone. And what started me off on the track that I'm on now was because in that branch I was working in, I was seeing clients and customers coming in, and they were looking at me and dealing with me and opening up accounts and savings and so on with me because they liked me, because they liked the way I explained things. But I was really frustrated because on the windows opposite was another branch of a rival bank building society, and I could see that they had better rates than what I was actually offering. So I decided there and then to go and set up my own business and do things and give advice the way I've always wanted to do. So that set me up on that course to where I am now. Now, my passion is for helping people. I love making complex things simple, but I wanted to do it my way. And in doing so, the only way I could do that is setting up on my own. Yes, it's a big risk, but the risk paid off. And often what we find is that when we have got our own businesses and our own companies, I think me personally, I'm unemployable now. I couldn't imagine working for someone and having those risks. In being employed, you're not pulling the strings, your employer is. But by doing it my way, I was in control of my own destiny, for want of a better word. So redundancy and losing your job at the time is an awful thing to experience and go through. And I do remember, and I do sympathise and empathise with people that are going through this right now. But guess what? What I've learned is that opportunity is often wrapped up in that awful time. It's wrapped up in the fear. And what I do know now is that the best things are often on the other side of fear. What I would suggest to people, if you are finding yourself out of work or redundant in some way, is to keep talking to people, your friends, your family. Who's the network of people that you know and that they know that can leverage to help you? But also is staying active, staying involved. When I lost my job, I was going off and I was raising money by selling things at boot fairs. I was helping out, I was doing some voluntary work for people, just so that I could still have things to do and I didn't just sit around in the house just thinking, woe is me. I was active to try and get myself out there and meet as many people as I could that could maybe help me. It's very hard to always stay positive, but I would say keep a positive attitude, talk to people, get what help and support that you can out there, and honestly, sometimes the very best things that happen in life are because something awful has happened before. So no matter how bad you're feeling now, trust me, you will feel better as a result of it. You're just going to have to trust me. There are better things out there and brighter future for you. I absolutely promise.
What really stands out for me in David's story is his emphasis on thinking about his clients. And it really goes to show how it's not just what you do, but how you do it, and how this was a really key driver in motivating him to start his own business. I think his advice about staying active, potentially volunteering, and always keep talking to people is so key. Not only does this help you mentally, but also you never know who you're going to meet and how they might be able to help you. Next up, we'll hear from HR expert Nick Hawley from Heads Up HR and hear what he thinks of David's story and what advice he'd give to other people experiencing similar challenges. Nick, thank you very much for joining us today.
That's a pleasure. It's nice to be with you.
So in David's story, we heard the importance of leveraging your contacts, but I imagine a lot of people kind of feel a little bit awkward, maybe feeling like they're taking advantage of friends and family, to ask for that sort of help and kind of introductions. What would your advice be to people in terms of how to do that and what the right level of kind of leveraging those supports is?
Well, I think that you've got to remember that everybody that you interact with, whether it's family or friends, presents an opportunity for you to get over what it is you're doing as an individual, as a business. And I don't think you should be shy. I think the key thing for me is, in a sense, being authentic about who you are as a person and being genuine. I kind of work on the premise that when I meet people, whether it's for the first time or I'm networking amongst family and friends, I'm not necessarily there to sell immediately what it is I'm doing. It's all about relatedness. Am I building a relationship? Are people starting to understand a lot more about what it is I'm doing? But I think conversely, what's also important is to be curious about the other person. I've learned through the course of my career that if you get the other person talking about themselves first and foremost, they love talking about themselves. And if you're interacting and engaging with them in that kind of manner, suddenly you're starting to build a relatedness, starting to understand. Being curious, I think, is absolutely key in any kind of relationship that you're looking to develop. And in a sense, you're not therefore going out knocking on doors per se to request selling or to immediately buy, but you're building a relationship. And at the end of the day, what's key for me is that people buy people. If you're authentic, if you're interesting, if you're engaging, then people will far better relate to you than if it's some person going straight away to this is what I do, how can I help you, etc., etc. Because you immediately, in my opinion, get people on the back foot and then they'll switch off. So okay. That's where I see this. Yeah.
Very nice. So I guess, is it a little bit like how they say, if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money? That idea of kind of asking for help and like you said, being curious. People tend to find that easier, don't they, to kind of contribute and help?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. And I think it's, any kind of relationship that I'm looking to develop, with a potential client relationship or whatever. Clearly, you're wanting to get your brand. Clearly, you're wanting to upsell and get to a position where you can exchange in terms of business. But I don't go into that explicitly. It's kind of quite an interesting trick. To just engage with people as a matter of interest, almost as a natural conversation, so that they can build the trust in you and you in them, and get to a position where they're comfortable to then want to engage in a discussion about the business that you're doing and whether or not they can help you and so on. So I think it's softly. It comes from authenticity. And a genuine desire to build a relationship, not purely get in there for the first sale.
Awesome. And David also mentioned about kind of taking available support. But I can imagine sometimes when people are first thrown out there, that initial shock of kind of redundancy, what am I going to do next? it can be hard for people to know what support is available and equally how to access it. What would your advice be for people who kind of want to see what they can kind of get available for them?
Well, I think you've got to do your research. I think, if you're thinking about going into your own business, the key thing is to make sure you've got a clear plan. And I think within the context of that, if you can tap into a lot of the support that sits around, for example, in Kent, you've got the Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce that offer amazing startup programs. If you live in the Medway district, they're free. If you're outside Medway, it'll cost you £60 for a 3-week program that introduces you to the basics of setting up a business, whether you're a sole trader or a limited company, access to finance, thinking about your marketing plan, your financial plan, your business, the whole kind of basics that you need in place are available through the Chamber of Commerce. So don't underestimate the power that can bring at a relatively modest cost.
And what would your advice be? I guess you mentioned about kind of cost, but there's some free stuff. What would your advice be about is there enough available for free, or do you miss out on, by spending kind of a modest amount, actually getting that next level of support that really is going to help you go to the next level?
Well, I think it comes down to how serious you are about your business. I mean, there are free resources available out there, and as I've just mentioned, even if you don't live within the catchment for the particular programs that Kent Invicta run, 3-week program, £20 for an investment for a 3-week program, should factor in as part of your business planning, if you like, because the value that you'll then get out of that will be exponentially significant to you. Clearly, you can go through banks. You've got the Federation of Small Businesses that can also help. Most of these are sort of membership organisations, so there's potentially some cost associated with doing that. But think about what that opens up in terms of the networks that you can start to get involved in, the webinars, the free webinars that you can start to tap into, that cover off a range of things from human resource management, strategic management, and marketing planning. The whole shooting match really brought together in quite a nice umbrella through a Chamber of Commerce approach.
Well, that's quite a nice way to think about it, isn't it? That it's not just support and training potentially, but it's also networking opportunities. Very nice. And is there anything else that struck you in David's story that you think you'd like to comment on or kind of add to?
I think what I find interesting in looking at David's story, in a sense, is you're making a kind of a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And very often when you're faced with redundancy, I think in David's case, he was probably on the cusp of wanting to launch his own business anyway, and sometimes you just need that little bit of a push to get you there. That's what you need sometimes, but that willingness to sort of throw yourself in there, to learn, to have that passion and desire are the things that I think will set you apart, rather than just kind of falling into something like a hobby that you've done and you think I can make this into a business, but it's still just a hobby. I think it's really just taking hold of it, getting on with it, and in David's case, really deciding this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to make the best of it. I think the other thing that sits behind it as well, and if you're in a fortunate position where you've got some money behind you, as I think in David's case he had, just bought a new house and so on. So if you've got a soft landing, having been made redundant, and you're setting up your own business, it takes away the immediate pressure of generating income and the pressures associated with meeting financial obligations and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Great advice. Nick, it's been great chatting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Nick Hawley from Heads Up HR. For more tips and advice, including information about his redundancy support programs, head over to headsuphr.co.uk. Thank you for watching When Laid Off Paid Off, Redundancy Success Stories. I hope you managed to find some hope and inspiration from this episode. I'll see you next time.